Welcome to Peachtree Injury Talk with attorney Jordan Jewkes.
Hello and welcome to Peachtree Injury Talk with experienced attorney Jordan Jewkes. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and today we are going to talk about severe injuries that can result from car and truck accidents in Georgia. Jordan, great to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Kevin.
So can you describe some of the most common, more severe injuries that you encounter in car and trucking accidents that happen on Georgia roadways?
Yeah, and this is a great topic because an injury can be severe to one person and not be severe to someone else. And so, we've talked a little bit in the past on some of these other episodes about spinal injuries. And spinal injuries, there's a whole spectrum of them. And those are the most common and also among the most severe. And in anything from a herniation to a ligament pull to a fractured vertebrae to an actual injury to the nerves, those can be just tremendous and cause a lot of pain and immobility and discomfort over a lifetime. One type of injury that has become better documented over the last 5 and 10 years is head injuries.
Yeah.
And head injuries are really tough because they are sometimes hard to diagnose, but those are some of the most severe, just really literally mind-altering injuries that can happen. And the science and the medicine is getting more adept, more accurate at actually diagnosing head injuries. So certainly head and spine injuries are, I would say, the two most severe injuries.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about this before, in football and sports, just like the idea that head injuries are becoming way more, noticed or understood, or we're being more cautious with them. And so would you say that in your experience that those like a head injury has the most long-term impacts on a victim's life?
Very often, and it certainly can be. Yes. A traumatic brain injury, by definition is just a damage to the brain and loss of brain cells. And it can be everything from a very minor concussion, which is basically a bruise or insult to the brain, to something where someone has physical, really severe damage to their brain, like blood, a cracked skull, literally physical damage to the brain where they just can't function anymore. And so there's a very large spectrum. They usually call it mild, moderate, and traumatic brain injury. It can be just exhibited by a slight headache after a wreck, and it can be just turning someone into someone who can't move their arms and legs anymore and just aren't the same person anymore.
Yeah, and even I think we've talked about this before, but even mild brain injuries they call them mild, but they're not. That doesn't mean that they're not serious.
You're exactly right. We have a case ongoing right now, and I probably can't share the details of it, where one of our clients hit her head in a incident involving a vehicle, and she would never have thought to herself that she had a traumatic brain injury, mild, severe, or otherwise. But now 3-4 years down the road, she continues to have significant decreased brain function, is the best way to say it, cognitive issues. And, it wasn't a super serious wreck, where there was a lot of damage to the vehicles or something like that. But she was fine before, and she's had difficulty with numbers, with memorizing things, with scheduling, with performing her job. And these are all traceable back to this incident that she was in.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Just because the car isn't in that bad a shape does not mean that the person inside the car is not in bad shape.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think most serious scientists and people who study this, engineers and doctors, will tell you can have a brain injury on a minor, low damage wreck, because and I know we've talked about this, but essentially your brain is suspended in liquid in your skull. When you have a type of whiplash motion, that can propel the brain to hit your skull within that fluid at a sufficient force and speed to damage your brain. And there's a good amount of peer-reviewed medical literature on that subject, and it's very well accepted now. There doesn't have to be a lot of damage to the vehicle for a brain injury to manifest.
In your experience, how do the severe injuries in a trucking accident differ from those in car accidents?
Yeah, trucking accidents tend to just be a bigger, heavier, faster vehicle that obviously has more difficulty slowing down. And so you can get a brain injury from a trucking accident. I would probably say they're far more common, just given the statistics of how large and how fast trucks tend to be operating. And but you can also get a one of very equal depth and severity from just two privately owned vehicles, in the neighborhood. So yeah, you can get brain injuries on either one, but probably more common and something you definitely want to look for and more in depth in a trucking accident.
Do you find that with some of the technological advances, the automatic braking and just warnings and stuff that cars have, do you see a decrease in some of these serious injuries since that's come around, or not so much?
I would say not so much. And let me say this, I'm all for all the better safety precautions, and cars need, car companies and as a society of a whole, we need safer, better vehicles, including private vehicles as well as trucks. I mean, that is an absolute must. And we're constantly changing the laws and upping the requirements to do that. And in a perfect world, you have absolutely safe, accident-proof vehicles, which would be great because that would mean we don't need any more attorneys and we also don't need to purchase insurance anymore.
There you go.
I don't think we're close to that yet. So those things, the more progress we make on that, the better.
Yeah, for sure. What types of medical treatments are often required for some of these severe injuries that you can get?
And that's a good question. And there are various specialists out there that really are good at diagnosing and good at treating and evaluating significant injuries. If you suspect you may have a significant spine injury, certainly an orthopedist and really a neurosurgeon are going to be the best to really diagnose, evaluate, and make recommendations for procedures and offer competent prognoses. If you suspect you may have a head injury, certainly neurologists are the ones who are the specialists who are best at diagnosing and, again, evaluating and recommending treatment for head injuries. So neurologists deal more with the brain and the nerves, and orthopedists and neurosurgeons deal more with the spine. Orthopedist is a very general term for bones and joints. But yeah, neurosurgeon and orthopedist for spine and neurologists for head injuries, brain injuries. Let me be more specific.
Yeah. I think a lot of us don't. We try to resist going to the doctor, to the hospital.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm fine. Have you seen situations where someone might be a little sore, decide not to go to the doctor, and it ends up becoming serious down the road?
Yeah, I mean, that happens all the time, and that's just part of being human. And we are industrious. We sometimes associate some level of shame with being injured in a car wreck. We don't want to portray ourselves as not being ourselves or being some level of injured or maybe unhealthy because of a car wreck or not in the same health condition. Let me say that. And so I think we want to tell ourselves and portray to our friends and church groups that, hey, we're fine. Yes, my car was totaled, but we're fine. So that really happens all the time. And the insurance companies, they are big fans of that. They love it when someone doesn't go to a doctor for 2, 3, 4 weeks, and they'll be the first ones to let me know. Well, if your client Jordan was really injured, they would have gone to the doctor, sooner. And that's an unfair criticism because by human nature, I think most of us avoid going to the doctor for no other reason than to incur bills and the inconvenience of it. Yeah. So yeah, that happens all the time.
I used to play hockey. I remember there was a time when the ER copay was like $75. And then so if I got injured or something, I'd be like, I don't really feel like it, but I probably should go get that looked at because that's kind of bad. Now, I mean, the copay is so expensive. It'd take a lot for me to go to the ER.
Right. And that's assuming you have insurance. I played a lot of soccer growing up. And, I remember one game specifically, we were playing our city rivals, and there was a lot of pushing and shoving. And the ball at one point, hit me in the face and I had a bloody nose. And my doctor or my coach was like, well, we need to take you right to the doctor because you probably have a broken nose. My thought was, I don't want to go to the doctor just so they'll tell me I have a broken nose. What are they going to do for me?
Yeah, what are they going to do? Put some tape on it and tell you to.
Right. Yeah. And so I think as a community, we avoid going to the doctor unless we're unsure of really the extent of our injuries. And it's important to go to the doctor. But yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head.
Can you discuss sort of the rehabilitation process for some of these more larger life-altering injuries?
Yeah, and of course, if you keep the severe injuries to spine and brain injuries, then just the extent of those injuries, the severity of them, like, let's take a herniated disc. Most of the medicine out there and the literature is going to show that a herniated disc, which is when sort of, if you compare the disc in your spine to almost a jelly donut, the disc being that part of the spine that is soft and cushy, that protects the vertebrae, the bony part of the spine. Most literature will tell you that when that disc herniates or sort of bulges and bursts, that is kind of like the cream coming out of the donut on that spine. Wow. And I think a good analogy is toothpaste. Once you have that toothpaste come out of the toothpaste tube, it's very difficult to go back in. And that cream out of the donut or the paste out of the tube, it doesn't naturally go back in and refill itself. And so a herniation is a very common injury from a rear end typical car wreck. And the very nature of it is it doesn't heal. And so if something doesn't heal, I would certainly consider that a permanent injury. Now, it may become less painful over time or even asymptomatic, but that injury is always going to be there. And I think one of the more important aspects of it is, or things to consider, is it makes you more susceptible to the next time to injury the next time you're in a car wreck or some other much less traumatic event happens. That herniated disc is going to be more susceptible to injury.
Yeah, because kind of weakened. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and really the same thing with the brain. Like if you get a head injury, I mean, we did a doctor's deposition, an expert deposition yesterday, and it was for a brain injury case, and she's, this is just actually a nurse practitioner or a PA, a physician's assistant. She says, what some of the common signs of a brain injury are headache, lightheadedness, vomiting, nausea, forgetfulness. These are really basic things. And it's easy, you experience those for a week and it's easy to sort of blow it off if most of those symptoms go away. But most people who have, a moderate to severe brain injury will tell you, I forget things, I forget names, I can't keep a calendar. I get moody. My personality's changed a little bit. I get quicker to anger. Those things tend to not go away. And so, they can be traumatic.
There's also some other things that I assume would, you look at too, are like the emotional and psychological effects that these severe injuries can have. That's all kind of often overlooked. You think about the physical nature of it, but it can kind of mess you up in the head too. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, without question, if you have a significant back injury, let's just say you have a herniated disc or maybe a 2-level herniated disc, and you've got almost minute by minute discomfort, your sleep is affected, your thought process is going to be affected, you're going to be constantly figuring out how to, alleviate that pain rather than focusing on yourself, or if you're married, your spouse, or if you have kids, your family, and suddenly down the road, you're not the same, father or mother that you were. You are, again, irritated. All of those things are a result of a significant head or back injury. And it's hard to calculate. How do you quantify my irritability level, my quickness to anger, my impatience, my shortness with my wife? All those things will be manifested in a long-term injury.
Yeah, we've all had the, mouth pain, tooth pain, wisdom teeth, anything like any injury. Used to play soccer, used to play hockey. Sure, I've had injuries where it lasts for a while, and it's you're irritable, you're tired of being in pain. Like it messes with your mood, it messes with you enjoying life.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's hard to really quantify that. And the insurance companies, when we make those claims, we can always anticipate the insurance company to say, well, show us some documentation that your mood has changed, or show us some evidence that, you're quick to anger now. And that's sometimes hard to do. But the best evidence for a brain injury, and sometimes also for a significant spinal injury, are your family members or your coworkers or people you go to church with. They are usually the best ones who will kind of say, sometimes behind your back, Jordan's not the same guy he was prior to the car wreck, or Kevin, gosh, we used to be best friends and hang out every weekend, and now I can't stand to be around the guy because the jokes, we tell aren't funny anymore. He doesn't like to play basketball anymore, and gosh, I almost feel like we don't have anything in common anymore. That, as funny as it sounds, is sometimes the best evidence that someone's mindset and personality and mood and brain has been physically altered because of a car wreck.
And people say that about me all the time, so I'm not sure I would know the difference. So
we don't like that guy.
What are some of the legal challenges that victims face when trying to get compensation when they have more severe injuries?
Yeah, I mean, that's at the very core of what we do. There's a lot that can be said to that, but essentially, it often will boil down to documentation. When we make claims against the insurance company, we have to be able to prove with very often documentation the extent of an injury. And what will happen is someone will call me and say, my doctor said I've got a brain injury or a spine injury, or my wife is telling me, I've got a brain injury, but the insurance company won't pay me. And almost always it's going to be, when we speak to the insurance adjuster, we're going to say, well, your client, Mr. Smith, just hasn't given me any proof of these injuries. And so we'll often take statements from loved ones, close associates, to have them write down or give an oral statement about the changes they've observed. And so documenting these long-term injuries, or talking to work bosses or colleagues to say, hey, look, has Mr. Smith been able to go into work the same amount or been as productive, and maybe they can't work anymore. And so really documentation is the biggest challenge. And that's really what we do as a law firm, is preserve, collect, and show that documentation to the insurance companies.
What other ways, other than the documentation, help with the documentation, does your firm help victims navigate these claims after a serious accident?
Yeah, great question. And there are several other ways. Certainly making sure they get the best medical treatment that they can. And that's probably the most important thing, is to see the best doctors to get better. Because ultimately, a claim against an insurance company, all it does is put money in your pocket. And I don't want to diminish that, but if you've got a permanent injury, head, spine, loss of a limb, whatever it may be, a few $1,000s or some amount of money from the insurance companies, it's not worth it. It just isn't worth it. $1 million for a head injury that makes you a different person for the rest of your life, it's not worth it. And so the best thing you can do is try and get your body back to where it was. And so we want to be able to help navigate that process, make sure, or to help you get the best medical treatment you can see. The other thing I would say is, sort of navigate the working, if someone is able to perform a job, that opens up a whole nother series of problems. I mean, imagine having a head injury or a back injury, and now you can't put, food on your table. That's depressing, causes a lot of anxiety. We want to help you through that process.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for joining us today on Peachtree Injury Talk with experienced attorney Jordan Jewkes. If you'd like to get in touch with Jordan, his website is jewkesfirm.com. And please like and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all things Georgia injury law. Hey, Jordan, thanks so much for being here. Great talking to you.
Thanks, Kevin. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.